Welcome back. Thank you for your patience. We get everything organized here. We have the hybrid format, of course, so some speakers are online and we have some here in the studio with us too. So this session is session 8, the agricultural outlook for specialized crops. It's going to run through who we have for the panel and then I'm going to introduce our first presentation. So we have Frederic Rossino. He is the Corporate Business Development Manager at Greenyard Group. He's on the stage with me here. Marijke van Schagen, she's the Socioeconomic Analyst at the European Commission for DG Agriculture and Rural Development. We have from Spain Mireia Torres, and she's Familia Torres, President, Plataforma Tecnológica del Vino. And Franz Enzer, he's CEO of Austria Juice. He'll join us also. And Juan Villar Hernandez, a strategic consultant at Grupo Olacola Yan also. So they will join us just a moment. In the meantime, it's my pleasure to introduce Frederic, who's going to lead us into the session today.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to take part in the panel session today, and I'd like to thank the European Commission for inviting us to give a keynote on the market trends in the fruit and vegetables sector. Next slide, please. For those who haven't heard about Greenyard, no offense, we are mainly a business-to-business player issuing our products under private label. But we are actually among the biggest companies dealing with fruit and vegetables in the world, and in Europe, I dare to say in the European Union, we're the biggest fruit and vegetable player. We deal with both fresh produce, that's our biggest area, where we supply big supermarkets with the entire range of fruit and vegetables. But we have also processing operations in terms of frozen fruit and vegetables and canned fruit and vegetables as well. We've about 9,000 employees, and I said we're a global player. We've a turnover of about 4.5 billion euros. Well, next slide. If you look at fruit and vegetables, one of the nice things, actually the nicest attribute of fruit and vegetables are the diversity in taste, in shape, in color, and in nutrients they carry as well. It's a great attribute, but I must say, if you're asked to discuss the outlook of the entire food and vegetable segment until 2030, that can be a bit of a curse, that diversity, because you have a whole panorama and each of these products have carry their own dynamics as well. But I've tried to sum up the global situation within Europe and try to picture what we expect for fruit and vegetables. If you look, we expect a worldwide significant future growth in the consumer spending on food and vegetables. There are two main drivers for that. Is the population growth, even if that's a bit slower in Europe than elsewhere in the world, and also the per capita GDP growth, which is driving healthier food choices. If you look at it at a world perspective, it's no surprise, of course, that the biggest growth at the global level is expected in Asia and Oceania, with growth levels of 7% in the coming years, whereas we're looking in Europe more towards 3 to 4% of growth in the future. If we move to the next slide. We still see, on top of the trends which we just discussed, a large untapped growth potential because of the health and sustainability attributes of fruit and vegetables. We all know fruit and vegetables are healthy, and you have a lot of campaigns, 5 a day, running and so on. But if we just let's say take another side on that picture and look, okay, what's the cost of underconsumption of fruit and vegetables in society? So the societal cost of not consuming enough fruit and vegetables. There's a lot of studies being done on that front as well. And then you see, and I take here the example of Belgium, that actually the underconsumption causes a loss of more than 50,000 healthy life years in Belgium each year. Now, just to compare that for cigarettes, for the fact that we use cigarettes, that figure is 500,000. So there is a societal impact of not consuming enough, and I think that's also one of the reasons we always call on authorities to do more to promote fruit and vegetable consumption, because it's eventually in their own interest as well. It will lower the health costs, certainly in a period of pandemic, where we've seen that being healthy is also important to stay healthy, let's say. Another element is we've, I think, heard a lot also in the EU Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy, also during this conference, the importance of plant-based food. Well, fruit and vegetables, and certainly our company is fully about plant-based foods. Fruit and vegetables are some of the best products you have, not only for health but also from a sustainability perspective. We have a very low environmental impact, and then it's also nice to see that there are even various NGOs like WWF taking on campaigns on plant-based food, promoting increased consumption of fruit and vegetables as well. I think it's one of the great things about nature. It's certainly no coincidence that actually what's good for your health is also good for the planet's health. Next slide. If we look at the EU market growth, it's mostly driven actually by more valuable categories. We see the sales in most countries have grown by 4 to 5% annually in terms of sales turnover, but the volumes have remained rather stable. And of course, this is just a graphic of retail sales. It's of course no surprise that in 2020 those sales went sky high because of the restaurants and food service mainly closing down during those periods. But still, we see in the first half of 2021 still also continued growth upon the levels of 2020. Now, if we look at those more valuable categories, there's no coincidence. This is also reinforced by consumer trends. One of them is the fact that we are curious to know about new tastes. We're also curious about to know about new textures, better textures, which leads us to let's say premium varieties, better tasting varieties in apples and various other fruit category where there's a lot of investments, but also new kind of products. And now I'm not going to state that avocado is still a new product, but it's still a product which is very versatile. It can be used in a lot of ways and in a lot of recipes. And there's still, if we look at the European situation, we're only half of the consumer consumption of avocados compared to the US. So there is still a lot of growth potential for that product within Europe. Another main element is convenience, and that's where we look at the snacking vegetables like the cherry tomatoes, but also it's introduced now into cucumbers, peppers, and other segments. If you look at berries, the fact that blueberries have become so popular is just also because of their convenience. You can basically grab them at any time, which makes that you can consume the fruit and vegetable all day long. And where there's a difference, just to that's one element that we are seeing, that berries are gradually set to become the most important fruit category in most of the European countries, and that is no small part thanks to the growth of blueberries, where consumers are actually willing to pay for better tasting varieties for the convenience these products offer. If you think of it, you go to a supermarket, you will pay on average €12 per kilo for blueberries, whereas for an apple you would pay €2-3 a kilo, a banana €1 or €2 a kilo. So if there is the potential to satisfy consumer demand, consumers are willing to pay for it. If we go to the next slide, you see that this next slide, please. We see also that this consumer appetite for exotics and soft fruit is also translated into international trade trends, where you see there is on the whole level of import in the European Union still growth, but it's mainly realized by berries, by avocado, mango. Also the grape category is still growing, whereas we've seen other product categories slightly declining. I take the example of apples and pears, where we become better and better at storing or local apples and pears during the entire year, and we've seen a gradual decline in import volumes, concentrating more on the period when those import products are at their best. If we look, maybe just there on the fact what it means in terms of international trade, the rise also of the other economies in the world and their appetite for fruit and vegetables as well. We said it in the beginning, the GDP growth, per capita GDP growth will be one of the main drivers for consumption growth worldwide. Then we see that this is having an effect also on international trade. Not very significant already, but if we look at, I put here the example of Chile, where we've seen that since recent years exports to China have grown significantly, and this will probably be followed by other countries as well. We see an increase in the export volumes to China from countries like South Africa, Ecuador. Peru is also fully negotiating free trade agreements with China, so that will have an impact in the longer run as well on the trade flows, international trade flows in terms of fruit. Now, if I go to my last slide, dealing with production, I think if we look, we're in a context of, and I think it was said before, an increased input costs. Also the fact that we have difficulties finding labor, people need to invest in automation, environmental compliance is becoming also stricter, so facing producers with increasing costs, and that has driven many of them also to increase the scale. This is particularly, we see a particular level of consolidation there in the more capital-intensive segments of our industry. I'm not talking about there of greenhouses, but also perennial crops, which require considerable amounts of capital and which have seen an increase of consolidation in those segments. But we also see that at the same time, producers also have to cope with increased stakeholder expectations and requirements moving beyond, let's say, just the good agriculture practices of the early 2000s, which were really the focus point that then we moved on to social compliance. But then there was a mistake in the slides, but let's say we moved on to other elements as well for climate action, which is taking a lot of energy, but also offers opportunity to produce more local. If you see opportunities to grow avocado, mango, also being explored in Southern Europe, and also in terms of other areas like water security, which is providing challenges to us, and also on biodiversity. And I think the important element in all of this is, yes, we will take our responsibility and as a sector. It will be important there that we cooperate around the entire value chain, but we also make sure that we reward the producers and the players in the chain to perform those investments and pay a fair price to make sure that the investments in becoming ever more sustainable and realizing sustainable food chain can be made. On that note, I'd like to thank you, and I look forward to the panel session.
So much. Just before you run off, just one question on the berries. I find that particularly interesting because it's something new in the market, and it seems to be a market driver to some degree. How do you anticipate what comes next in terms of growth markets like this? What do you see in the marketplace?
Well, I think, as I said, the main drivers are convenience and better taste. And let's say berries have recently been particularly successful in realizing that potential. But we also see, let's say, other segments in fruits which are pursuing the same investments, and we will see them trickle down as well. But that appetite also for exotics remains, and we're constantly on the lookout there as a company as well.
And are these regional variations or global changes?
Let's say I wouldn't say this is not only regional. This is
Okay.
certainly at a global level, more pronounced, I think, in let's say in the richer countries, and particularly Western Europe, US. But we see, I mean, the underlying tendencies are something that will develop everywhere.
So the emerging market in blueberries. Thank you very much. I find this also interesting. My grandparents were one of the biggest fruit and vegetable manufacturers, producers in Ireland for a long time as well. So I grew up with all this stuff around me as well.
Lovely.
Thank you so much. Stay with us. Okay, we're going to hear from Marika now. We have essentially 3 panels, 3 sections, about 15 minutes each. And Marika's going to kick off just with a presentation on the outlook on specialized crops as well. Over to you.
Good morning. So thank you, Brian. Indeed, I will present to you the outlook for the specialized crops. And I will start talking about the fruit and vegetables. So maybe I can show the first slide. We project overall stability. Can we have the first slide, please? Yeah. So we project overall stability for the consumption of fresh fruit and vegetables. That's the orange bars on in the graph, though with differences across the products. So as you can see, we expect an increase in the production of apples and oranges and a decline in the productions of peaches and nectarines and tomatoes. The decline in tomatoes is mainly coming from the increased competition from tomatoes coming from Morocco, also increasingly from Turkey. And producers in particular in Spain are shifting increasingly to other more profitable crops. But also in other member states, producers tend to switch to more smaller varieties which have a smaller volume as well, but with a higher added value. For apples, this growth is mainly driven by increased production in Poland, following the modernization of the sector. This will lead to an increase of quality, but also we expect that this increase will not fully be absorbed by the increased consumption either in Poland or in the EU. That also explains why we expect a growth in the apples for processing. Let me now turn to the wine and olive. Next slide, please. For olive oil, that's the sector where we expect the largest growth, 22%, but with differences amongst member states. In particular, we expect a growth in Spain and Portugal, where there's a lot of investment intensive and in super intensive systems, which will push the yield up. For wine, we expect a decline in production. There's a stable area, but we expect to have more production of PDO and PDI wines and organic wines, which will have, in general, a lower yield. However, there will also be further investment, further switching to new varieties, which are better, more resistant to climate change. And that brings me actually to the point of discussion that we will have today with the panelists, because the sectors that we're looking at today are very vulnerable for change, for climate change and weather events. So production is varying a lot, and producers actually they have to adapt to this, and they try to build resilience for these changes in weather. But in the same time, of course, they have to adapt to changes in consumer preferences and also to societal expectations, for example, to mitigate climate change. And I'm looking very much forward to hear more about this from our panelists. Thanks a lot. Right.
Okay, that's what we're going to kick off with now. As you know, people in this room will be very keen to hear about the impact in the wine production industry. It's a very sensitive issue for many of our staff here. So we want to go to Mireia Torres as well. Mireia is going to be speaking in Spanish today, so you can use the translation function. I have here with my iPad also. My Spanish is not quite good enough to cope with this. Miss, you should be able to have access to English for everything that's going on as well. So, Maria, I want to ask you, how is climate change impacting wine production?
Well, finally, I will try to speak in English.
Okay, thank you.
So it's true that climate change is something real. Temperatures have been increasing since the 90s. And the pluviometry has also diminished. So we have strong rain, we have heat waves, we have hail, we have problems of frost, and this is affecting us, the quality and also the productivity in the wine sector. So what can we do, the wineries? No? we can do a lot of things with in the vineyard, for instance, with drip irrigation. We have had a lot of projects of research trying to find the best sensors and the best algorithms that can help us to take the better decision in order to apply the right quantity of water in the right moment to have the quality and productivity. Another alternative is also the regenerative viticulture if you don't have the possibility to do drip irrigation, if there is no water. With regenerative viticulture, you have some cover crops in your soil and you enhance the biodiversity, you enhance also the carbon fixation in the soil, you reduce the tillage, and you can increase the capacity of retention of water in your soils. Other things that we can do also, we are doing a lot of trials, in order to find the best trellis systems in the vineyards. We are also doing a lot of research with the varieties that are more adapted to climate change. They achieve the maturity much later and they have higher acidity. Also, we can plant in a higher latitude or in a higher altitude. And of course, then also in the winery, it's important also to be very efficient in the consumption of water. And we are, for instance, in Familia Torres, where I'm the manager of innovation, we are nowadays reusing between 25 and 35% the water that we have used in the winery.
Excellent. Your English is perfect. Thank you for taking the time to do that today. And just on this as well, you talked about some of the mitigation issues, mitigation factors that you're using to help with climate change and the adaptability of the sector as well. But how do you market wine with less emissions? Is this something that you consider? Is this something you see will be possible?
Yes, of course. For instance, in our company, in Familia Torres, we have reduced the carbon footprint, from 2008 to 2020, more than 30%. And now we have the new goal in 2030 to be 60% less. And we want to be carbon neutral in 2050. So for that, we are using, of course, the ISO 14064. In order to calculate all these emissions, we are investing a lot in renewable energies, also in biomass boilers. We are also investing in electric cars. We have reduced more than 30% the weight of our bottles, and also we have more than 1,800 hectares of forest, and we are now also planting forest in La Patagonia.
Wow, you've really gone through
Another thing also that...
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. There is also another thing that I think it's important, is that many wineries now are promoting also some type of associations that are promoting also the sustainability. So, for instance, in Torres with Jackson, they started some years ago, Wineries for Climate Action. Nowadays there are 22 members in this association from all the world, and there are other 30 that are coming. And they are doing a lot of efforts, in trying to be carbon neutral in the 2050. They are constantly reducing the emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions, and they are, of course, doing a lot of investment in renewable energies.
Excellent, thank you. So we can consume more wine with a cleaner conscience. Thank you very much. Well, let's move over to Juan Villar now as well. Juan, you deal with olive oil production. How is climate change challenging olive oil production as you see it?
Depends on. There are some countries which will improve the current situation, like, for example, Portugal or Spain or Georgia or some of these countries, but there are some more countries in which there are not enough water in order to use to improve the cultivation, in which they will have problems. Then depends on the country, the change climate will be okay, or in some cases will be not very good, because the water is a resource that step by step we need in order to improve the quantity and quality of the olive oil which we obtain with agriculture.
Excellent. Thank you. Just a reminder, please send your questions in Slido. We're going to do a couple of questions from Slido at the end of each portion of the discussions today. So we've got about 5 minutes left on this section. We have a question from Frederick already. Franz, Enza, you work in the juice sector. Climate change, how does this affect your business and what are you doing to protect yourself?
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
Just in a couple of words, we are an Austrian-based fruit juice concentrate processor active in 7 countries, and we are, besides the fruit juice business, also active in juice compounding and flavor business. So what is the impact on the climate change? Yes, in fact, quite similar to the wine sector. The main impact on our business is the availability of raw material on a year-on-year basis, because what we already can see over the last 5 to 10 years. The situation on our raw material supply is quite volatile, and there are 2 main reasons for this. The one, of course, are the frost events that take place mainly during the flowering period, and secondly, it's about the drought and the water supply. What is the result out of this? The result is very clear. We have a huge impact on the price development for the raw materials, and this price difference can be more than 100% from one year to the other. And as you might know, that raw materials are the key drivers for our product cost calculation. There is a direct impact on the competitiveness of the products which are produced within the European Union versus the third country products. So in fact, raw material prices are the decisive element. And once you are outpriced or prices are simply too high on the European production, then of course consumers around the globe will simply switch to other origins. So what do we do as a company, as a producer, how we can mitigate those risks? Of course, there are more than just one aspect here. For sure, one is about the production technology. Also, of course, water consumption, drip irrigation, all these aspects are important, but also, of course, plant breeding technologies, aiming at a higher resistance of plants against the drought, or, for example, the selection of those varieties which are showing what we call a so-called delayed flowering characteristic, meaning that we can counteract these early frost effects on the crop especially. Another aspect, and this is more related to our company, what we are doing, so related production and processing, is that we focus on our geographical footprint. As I said, we are active in 7 countries, but probably that's not enough. So we are thinking about enlarging our processing footprint, because food processing is basically a global business, and therefore it's important that we further explore alternative sourcing area also outside the EU. And this is crucial for us for balancing the risk of crop failure. And at the end of the day, we still need to have the product in order to supply our customers. So this is, of course, one element that we are definitely doing constantly. And we have to see, and Mareike explained, that the backbone for our production is Poland. Okay. So what happens if there is a frost in Poland? We still need to supply our clients. So we have to see what alternatives we have, especially on the geographical footprint.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got a couple of quick questions here, one for Frederick and one for Juan. Frederick has asked, how sustainable are exotic fruits or berries in plastic packaging coming off season from the Southern Hemisphere? Healthy versus sustainability? Frederick, quick reply to that.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take packaging out of the equation because it's already an interesting question as itself. In any sustainability discussion, there's of course also dilemmas. There is indeed a dilemma between health and environmental sustainability. There are also the social element of, let's say, helping communities in the Southern Hemisphere to develop their economies. So that remains an important element. We have capacity building projects in countries like Mali, but there is also this eternal discussion about beans from Kenya. But I think we also need to respect that we also have a responsibility as a rich continent to develop economies worldwide. So that's one dilemma. The other dilemma is indeed about let's say the health and the societal impact I mentioned. Versus the sustainability of imported products. I think it's our role as a company and as a sector to make sure that the products we import are as sustainable as possible, and that's a constant drive we have as a company, but also accept, I think, in terms of the importance of diversity for consumers and giving them the options so that they can choose to make sure that they can eat fruit and vegetable every day. So that's the dilemmas which are there, and I think in any discussion we need to accept that we make the best out of these dilemmas and choose wisely.
Well said. Thank you so much, Frederick. And just Juan, you've 60 seconds in this. How do you see future of small-scale olive oil farming in the EU, in particular in Greece and Italy? Juan. You're on mute. You're mute. Can you unmute? There we go.
Yeah, sorry. Up to now, there are the trends in this kind of evolution, if in two different ways. In the first way, they are planting step by step more super intensive and intensive cultivation, especially in Portugal, especially in Spain, in the south of Spain and Extremadura, Andalusia mainly, and also in Italy, this situation is changing. They are transforming traditional olive cultivation into intensive, super intensive. Then the production in the next, I think, 20 years will increase around 20-25% for the European community. Also, it's important that there are step by step more countries which are producing olive oil and olive table in the European community.
Okay.
Yes, this is the trends of next year.
Okay, thank you for that. And now we're going to move on to talk about consumption, and Marika's back with us for that.
Thank you, Brian. So indeed, I'd like to say a few words on consumption. So consumption trends are not surprisingly evolving a lot, and partly driven by the COVID pandemic, which has accelerated or reinforced certain consumption trends. Health and sustainability, also mentioned by Frederick, are key in this, of course. People increasingly want to know where the products are coming from, and they buy more local products. But also there are new trends, such as home cooking, which are expected to remain, to have a longer-term impact. The graph here shows our projections for the consumption both of fresh fruit and vegetables on the left side and processed fruit and vegetables on the right side of the graph. As you can see, we expect an increase in fresh fruit and vegetables, in particular in apples, and oranges are expected to increase. And here, increased health awareness, and also together with public initiatives are expected to be the drivers for the growth of the consumption of fruit and veg. For apples, the new varieties that are better correspond to consumer preferences, in particular in Poland. These apples were previously aimed at the Russian, are expected to stimulate demand, in particular in Poland. But having said this, we expect that overall the apples is losing competition in the overall fruit basket, as Frederick also mentioned, because of it's losing competition with the more popular fruits at this moment, more tropical fruits and berries. And also peaches are expected to lose in the total fruit basket. But overall increase, whereas for processed fruits in particular, we project a decline. For example, in particular in the processed apples, of everything used for juices, in particular the juices from concentrates. Let's go to the next slide, please, where we see the consumption of wine and olive oil. We expect a decline of the consumption of wine with almost half a liter per capita. This is a clear slowdown of the declining trend, because just as a reference, in the previous period, 2010-2020, the decline was 7 liters per capita. So now it's only half a liter. And one of the reasons of this expected slowdown is the fact that the wine sector is adapting to the changes in lifestyle, which have been partly accelerated by the COVID pandemic. And I'm sure that Mireia Torres will be able to explain more about this later on. For olive oil, the consumption overall is rather stable, but with differences amongst member states. While on the left hand you see the main producing countries, there we expect a decline in the consumption, reflecting a maturity of the market and the different consumption style of the younger generations. But the decline is slowing down compared to the past. And on the right side, you see the non-producing member states where the olive oil and the health awareness of the positive effects of olive oil are increasing, and the popularity of the Mediterranean diet. But here the increase is slowing down. What are the main elements I wanted to picture here? Back to you, Brian.
So let's go back to our panel to talk a bit more about this in more detail. It's a question for everyone, so you get some quick answers on this first. What are the main trends in demand in your sector, and how do you expect your sector to adapt as well? Let's go to Maria. What are the main trends in your sector?
Well, the main trends in my sector would be, first of all, that to keep local, ethical and sustainability sourced ingredients are more important than before. And here, the brands, they have to increase actions towards sustainable production. And for instance, here I could mention, for instance, fair trade or also these sustainable certifications. Another trend is also the organic category. This is very important. And the compound annual growth rate, for instance, from 2017 to 2022 in organic wine has increased more than 9%. And especially Spain, France, and Italy, they are the leaders in organic wine production. And it is expected to have an increase from 2018 to 2023 for more than 50%. And finally, I would say also that it's important also the functional attributes. No? So global consumers, more than 56%, they are influenced of how product can affect their health and well-being. No? So especially the young consumers, and this means that now they don't want to sacrifice their health and their personal image, and low alcohol wine is increasing. For instance, the compound annual growth rate of low alcohol wine from 2016 to 2020 has increased more than 36%, and is expected to increase more 15% from 2001 to 2024. And then also, no alcohol wine has also increased. The compound annual growth rate from 2016 to 2020 has increased more than 17% and is expected to increase 8% more from 2001 to 2024. And especially in Spain, the level of consumption of no alcohol wine has increased more than 20% in the last years and is expected to increase more than 20% in the next years.
Wow, that's quite impressive, actually. Thank you so much, Maria, for that. Franz, over to you. In your sector, what kind of shifts in demand do you see, and how are you adapting to this?
What we can see, of course, beside all these issues on sustainability, like origin of the product, transport costs, what we can see that, especially related to juices, we see that calorie intake is an issue, especially in the, let's say, in the high developed countries. So what we try to do here now is that we have, in fact, found now new production technology in order to reduce the calories within the juice, but still to offer 100% juice to the consumers. So this is really something new, something absolutely innovative, and beside, let's say, just on the focus on the juices, on the, be it concentrate or NFC, doesn't matter. What we are doing is, of course, we are trying to constantly create new products, and this is more the juice compound, and it means we are taking less juice into the drinks, and these drinks are normally based on recipes. Overall, the target is that we offer to the consumer less calories when they're consuming drinks. Secondly, what we try to do, of course, is that we are working on our export opportunities. And I have to confirm the outlook from Mareike that we see a declining trend on juice consumption in Europe. So what we are doing is now that we are focusing on our export markets, and we see good opportunities, especially US, Canada, the Far and the Middle East. And this is all depending, of course, on the competitiveness. This brings us back to the raw material prices, the effects through the climate. So it's a long chain, always coming back. At the end of the day, we need to competitive if we want to export.
Okay.
Just to give you an indication, the global market for apple juice is around 1.3 to 1.5 million tons. Europe is producing between 450 to 500,000 tons and still is a net importer. So there's plenty of room for us to cover or to go into these markets. We just have to prove our competitiveness. And finally, I think one important aspect in this that we have to also market and sell the attributes of the European products, which is quality, food safety, and sustainability.
Thank you. Juan, Marika had a snapshot of what's happening in the olive oil sector as well. So how are you adapting to market changes?
Now there are two different ways in the sector. From the point of view of the production, they are trying to improve the competitiveness of the olive orchard. And then in this way, they are planting super intensive and intensive cultivation, mainly in the south of Portugal and Spain. And on the other hand, they are one way in order to improve the EBIT of the farmers, and is like Maria was speaking before, with the organic cultivation. There are a lot of kind of cultivation which trying to increase the net rent of the olive farmer, increasing the price of the product based in the sustainability and in the biodiversity. This is the two ways. In terms of consumption, which one is the current situation? We have a problem because not only in Europe, also in the rest of the planet, the people from 49 to the end of his or her life are the group which more olive oil are consuming up to now. The young people are not consuming olive oil due to the different customs and the different kind of life that they have. They are having lunch out, they are having dinner out at home, and then we need to improve the promotion of the product, especially in the old countries, especially in Spain, especially in Portugal, in Italy, where we are having a lack of consumption, especially in the category from 0 to 49 years old.
Okay.
Then we have to improve in this way.
Thank you. Frederick, this is interesting in terms of you have the big picture, the global view of all these sectors as well. You know, when you're looking at not just the next year or two, but next 5, 10 years, you must see regional variations like Ryan described in terms of not just countries, but the age categories as well. What strikes you as being most interesting out of that in terms of opportunity? Where would you encourage people to pitch in terms of market shift and adaptability?
Well, I think it's still that there's definitely variations, some regional, but I think overall they're the same. But if you look at the age categories, I think there's still improvements we can make. We have let's say the older population, which is already much more health aware and will consume more than average, and often younger categories which do not always know how to prepare. Are curious about certain elements, but really trying to nudge them towards more fruit, consuming more fruit and vegetable. I think in that sense, for those segments, convenience is key, and that's where we as a company are really focusing on unburdening the consumer with not knowing how to make something, so offering him a meal kit so he doesn't have to think he has all ingredients in one packet. He has the recipe with it, so he can just cook a nice meal from scratch. Or for those who are even more in a hurry or are really having difficulty to cook, to really make already frozen or prepared vegetable with a seasoning on it, so it's really just just heating it and being able to
This is
consume it.
cooking
So
for
it's
dummies. It's
really, really looking at offering a more convenient offer to these generations.
You know, we spoke a lot about education of the consumer yesterday as well. I can't help but feel that this applies in the same instance, that if we're going to move to a more healthy approach, we're going to reduce meat consumption, we have to learn to cook as well, and that's got to start in schools, because homes are probably not going to do this terribly well either. Please send in some questions on Slido. We're going to keep going to that. I just want to talk to a quick question to Mireille as well on this. The 20% shift in the non-alcoholic wine was interesting. What do you see behind not just that shift, but societal change as well? Do you perceive changes in attitude? Are these governed by particular age groups, the young and, like you said, about self-image, things like this? What would your key takeaways be for our audience today on that? Societal change.
Yes, in general, the young consumers, they are very concerned with health and well-being. And for instance, especially in Spain, more than 73% of the young consumers, they would change their habits. So that's why I think this is a tendency that is increasing. Perhaps people is more concerned with alcohol, and that's why it's important also to have this category of wine with less alcohol and or no alcohol wines.
Just on that, are people motivated by a sense of moderation in alcohol consumption, or is this calorie driven? Do you think that people are particularly younger people, want to restrict calorie intake, and non-alcoholic wine is one way to do that?
Well, I think it's both.
Okay.
In general, also these the alcoholized wines, they have also a higher level of content of sugar, but it's true that in general they have less calories. Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's go to our next section. We'll bring back Marika for the global dimension.
Thank you. So I would like to present to you a few words on our net trade position. The graph here shows that, confirmed that actually for fresh fruit and vegetables, our net trade position is declining. You can see that the exports of apples and tomatoes are projected to be below the 2020 level in 2031. And the main reason for this is the export potential on certain countries is new markets is limited, either because of phytosanitary restrictions or because of the increase in competition with neighboring countries. In particular for apples, this is the case. However, for processed apples, so the second graph, the right graph, there we expect an increase of the net exporting position. And this is reflecting the decline of the consumption of juice concentrates in the EU, and also the increasing interest for consumers to consume in local and new products, not coming from concentrates. And these are most likely to be produced domestically. Now for the next slide. For olive oil and wine, we have always been net exporters, but this export position is growing. And this is the importance. If you look to olive oil, there the growth is highest. This is driven, of course, mainly by the increase of production in the EU, what we mentioned earlier this morning. And also because of the per capita consumption in the main export destinations is still relatively small. So it's quite evident that there's a big potential of growth. And the EU, of course, will also benefit from the positive health image of olive oil consumption. And rising incomes in certain countries and prices that are competitive with other vegetable oils will expected to boost the olive oil exports. In particular to China, which is a traditional market, but also to Southeast Asia and Russia, which are relatively new. For wine, we have seen exports developing quite different developments. In 1619, the exports were quite stable. Then we saw a big drop in 2019, but last year the exports have been record high. And we expect actually the exports to further grow, mainly driven by the high demand for EU quality wines and sparkling wines of geographical indication and also of sparkling wines. But in the same time, we expect that there will be a market for low entry level, so low priced wines, and the EU could possibly further develop this market. Thanks a lot. Let's do.
That's great, thank you, Marika. And so we're talking now about the global dimension, the big picture, and also in terms of exports, what we European producers can deliver more into the global market as well. So let's turn to wine first. And olive oil, the world wants our olive oil. Can we sell it more broadly? Can we target new markets? How do you see it?
Up to now, we can find in the planet around 66 countries which produce olive oil, and then 80% is produced in the European community. Due that, we have to look for more and more consumer in the world. Up to now, there are 198 country consumer in the world, and in this group there are three different groups: the mature countries which are reducing the consumption. In this mature group of countries is Spain, Italy, Jordan, and these countries which produce for a lot of years. There are a second group which is the leader is USA and Brazil, and then they are increasing the consumption step by step. For example, up to now, USA is the third consumer in the world, above of Greece. And there are another group which are the countries which are increasing also the consumption of olive oil, but they are not producing, they are not familiar with the product. And this group is leading, for example, by Canada, by Germany, by UK, by Russia, and then they are increasing also the consumption. Then up to now, the target, the focus are the countries which are not mature producer, the countries which can increase the consumer, like the group second and the third.
Okay, thank you. Franz, how do you see it in the juice sector? You spoke a little bit about this earlier, about the market opportunity and the changing dynamic of that. Where do you see the market opportunity?
So our opportunities mainly are focused on the areas in the US, Canada. Secondly, we have, let's say, stable, good and growing business in the Middle East countries, so all the Arabic countries. And then our third, let's say, area of targeted destination is the Far East. So it's about Japan, it's about Indonesia. And beside that, we have other opportunities, which is Australia and South Africa. Unfortunately, limited opportunities in Southern America, but these countries are clearly countries which are focusing mainly on orange and let's say call it the yellow products. But for apple, it's those countries. And of course, it's all about competitiveness. It's about import duty. It's about non-trade barriers that we need to overcome. It's about transport costs. But overall, the markets are there, and it's all about the competitiveness of the EU production to serve these markets. But the markets are there and existing and also growing.
But can you grow into those markets, increase your competitiveness, and at the same time be sustainable in terms of climate dimensions? Is that an equation that you can solve?
Yes, that's we see the rising demand for this sustainability topic. Our company has an ambitious target to source or produce our products till the year 2030, 100% according to sustainable guidelines. We have a lot of initiatives on this. We have this sustainable juice covenant. We have the sustainable agricultural initiative as our basic, and already now we achieved 30% of our total output is already under these sustainable targets. We have the farmers certified gold, silver, bronze. So we are working on this quite a lot. Yeah.
And in terms of how consumers perceive that shift, which is really substantial, do you see value being returned in terms of consumer awareness and purchasing and margins?
Not, unfortunately, not the margins, but at least in terms of awareness. Yeah, the awareness is there. I think the Orange did a lot of pre-work on this, coming from this Rainforest Alliance and all these certifications. And so I think for me, this sustainability issue, it will not disappear anymore. So we discussed about carbon footprint, I think, already 15 years ago. at a certain point of time that discussions slowed down and maybe it lost the interest. But now I think sustainability is on a table and will not disappear anymore. So this is the coming trend for the next decade, I would say.
Thank you. Maria, you outlined a lot of what your company is doing in this aspect and what the opportunities are, but what are the challenges for you to be competitive globally and be climate sensitive?
Well, I would say that at the end, it's important, I think the organic products, they are increasing and combined with regenerative viticulture, this is a challenge for the next years. Also to get the right sustainable certification is also something that is very interesting for the sector. And then, of course, in innovation, in order to have a reduction in greenhouse emissions, this would be also important for us.
Thank you. Just a reminder, please send your questions on Slido. We're going to bring one to Juan in just a moment. But Frederick, the same element in terms of challenges as well. You spoke about opportunities, what's there, but this equation of export growth, competitiveness, and at the same time being climate sensitive. What are the challenges? Are there non-tariff barriers, or is this? And you touched on water earlier as well, which I think is critical. How do you deal with this?
No, I think for us as an industry, I mean, we as a company are mainly focusing on the home market, Europe and US, but generally from an industry perspective, yes, Europe is a fruit and vegetable powerhouse, but we are, let's say, mainly focused on, as an entire industry, on supplying that European market. We see our main export partners are Switzerland, Norway, mainly neighboring countries, and where we have really good products, which we can differentiate themselves, where it's not just the price playing a role, we can go abroad. But SPS, so sanitary and phytosanitary measures there are in our disadvantage, because you have countries like South Africa, which can just dedicate entire orchards who go to China. We don't have that luxury, or less that luxury here in Europe. But I think and that's our vulnerability as a sector, because we're so dependent on our neighboring countries. We've seen it with Russia a couple of years ago. We've seen this week Belarus announcing that it would ban imports from Europe as from the 1st of January. That will impact about 10% of our extra EU exports in Europe. So there we will. That's really something we will be looking also to the European Commission to make sure to accompany the sector, not to have too many negative consequences there. So that also highlights the importance of further diversifying our export markets in order not to be, and I must say, they're too dependent on the eastern side, which have proven less reliable in the past years, and which have impacted certain sectors quite a lot.
Okay, thank you. Let's bring this question to Juan. And from Slido, Juan, the question is, how do you see the growth of exports outside of the EU for a higher quality olive oil?
Yes, there is a tendency up to now, step by step, in the world, the people are consuming more extra virgin olive oil than before. Up to now, more than 55% of the total consumption in the world is extra virgin olive oil. This is very good because the customer is step by step sophisticating their behavior, and then step by step we are trying to improve the quality of the olive oil in the farmer, and then increasing at the same time the level of rent, the EBIT, the profit in the market. Also, it's important that the most important percentage of refineries are in the UAE, especially in Italy and Spain, and then they need raw material. In this case, the raw material is Lampante, the Lampante olive oil, in order to sell in the planet. But of course, up to now, the trend, the tendency is to produce quality products which arrive from the sustainable farmers, and also at the same time that improve the biodiversity. For example, now in Spain, in Italy, and in Greece and Portugal, there is a program which try to improve the production of the olive oil, and at the same time the level of animals that are living in the orchard. They are trying to improve the profitability, but at the same time the biodiversity. This program is Olivares Vivos, and they are working in order to improve the sustainability and the biodiversity, and then the farmers has the opportunity to improve also the profitability of the orchards. Then this is one of the tendencies that the European community are supporting in the agricultural area.
All right, thank you for that. And another question for Frederick. Fruit and veg is, together with bread and bakery, the food sector with the highest amounts of food waste. What can the sector do to reduce the CO2 wastage?
Well, I think there, indeed, at the consumer level, there is still some work to be done in educating consumer to choose the right products, and to also see, okay, if they have bought a bit too much, or if the quality of a certain fruit turns out to be a bit less, that he can reuse it, recycle it in soups at home. So there's still a bit of consumer education there again that we can do, and we see a lot of initiatives there, regional initiatives going on to really bring that knowledge again to the consumer, not just to say, okay, well, I don't know what to do with it. No, well, put it in your freezer, and for instance, for tomatoes, put it in your freezer. You can reuse them when you make a pasta sauce, or when you want to make soup. So that's one element, and I think also within our value chain, we are constantly looking, okay, at certain byproducts. Can we reuse them? We process frozen and canned products. Well, we prepare these kind of products which can use at times lower grade qualities as well, and so we can take these on board and also look again for when there's really no other options to animal feed as well. But that remains a point of attention for us as a sector, where we, but also on the consumer level, we really need to take further steps to educate them.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick question before we move on a little bit. Where do you see a potential for growth of organic fruit and veg imports? Somebody from outside of the EU. For you, Frederick. So just a quick, so somebody from outside of the EU is asking, where do you see a potential for growth of organic fruit and veg imports?
Well, I think there is still overall potential for organic fruit and vegetables. There is definitely, that market is still increasing, and we see that imported products are doing good within that segment. So if you look at today, the share of fair trade / organic bananas, that's really quite high, and we see that other products are following that path as well. So for sure, there's still potential there.
Okay, we have just a few minutes left. I just want a quick answer from each of our panelists on what actions, in your opinion, will make your business or sector fit for 2030. Mireia, what can you do that's going to make your business sector fit for 2030?
Yes, well, I think it's important to support the innovation, and that's for this we have the Plataforma Tecnológica del Vino in Spain that is supported by the Interprofesional del Vino and the Federación Española del Vino. Innovation is very important in order to find the solutions for the adaptation to climate change. Another thing that would be important, of course, as wine producers, we are always saying that wine consumption in moderation is good for health, but it would be very important for the European Union to accelerate the regulations of enological practices for de-alcoholized wines and low alcohol wines. This would be something very interesting. And finally, of course, digitalization is something very important for the next years.
Okay, thank you. You just see on your screen there also, we're doing a word cloud. Please put in your answers to that. I'll read them out in just a moment. Which actions are, in your opinion, most important to make specialized crops fit for 2030? Put your answers in there. We've got a couple already. Thank you. Well, the same question about your sector and your products as well, your business. What more can be done to make it fit for 2030? Juan?
It's the same. The most important thing is the innovation. We have to improve the level of innovation efficiency of the orchards. The second one, the sustainability. We have, of course, to be sustainable with the global situation of the planet. Also, we have to have the behavior of the customer, of the clients, in order to give them the best product that
Frozen there. Okay.
we have to be. Now it's better.
Yeah, it's good.
And at the same time, we have to. Okay.
We'll leave it there. We're nearly out of time anyway, so frozen fruit and vegetables just now. Thank you very much. Well, and let's go to Franz as well. Your sector, your business, fit for 2030. What else can be done?
First of all, I think listen to the consumers, anticipate the trends. Innovation, I think, has already been mentioned here. And for me, the crucial element I have to say is how can we secure the raw material for the processing, the raw material availability. This will be key for our sector.
Okay, thank you. And last word, Frederick?
Yeah, well, I think we had our Capital Markets Days this week with a company, and two words stood out, and it was sustainability and innovation, and they will go hand in hand. We will need innovation to overcome some of the factors in sustainability which we come upon. But I think even more important will be that cooperation throughout the value chain to make sure that we leave no one behind, and we really we refragment the sector to make sure that we aid all our suppliers in getting there and becoming fit for 2030 also on their level.
Just very quickly on the innovation side, what did you hear mentioned in terms of we should do this in terms of innovation?
Oh, well, there's that many aspects in our sector. It goes from better varieties to looking at ways to improve the shelf life of our products, but even, I would say, even in automation, helping farmers. I mean, the difficulties to find labor, helping there to look at robotization, which is an area which we are looking into as well. So it's really a plethora of domains where we need to look for innovation opportunities, and we're looking there as well to cooperate with startups. But because of course it's not something we can just take on our own, we will look also at external opportunities to reach that.
This is right on message from what we heard from the commissioners yesterday. So the opportunity for rural areas to change the dynamic and to bring home younger people as well who have these skill sets. All right, we're nearly out of time on this. So you have been replying to our question, which actions are in your opinion most important to make specialized crops fit for 2030? Improve resilience. That's the critical element here as well. So saving water and new varieties. Short producer to consumer lines, sustainability, increased EU consumption, but of the right kind of food, obviously, and climate change adaptation, revalue old varieties, and education. I want to see education in bigger letters on this word cloud, but improve resilience is a dynamic which we see in a lot of European Union policies right now, and clearly that's important for the food sector as well. We're almost out of time, but we're going for a coffee break now in the virtual networking, and we've got 15 minutes. We're back at 11:45. Enjoy your espresso.